Okay. While the house is oddly devoid of curious people being nosy, I'm going to make a batch of dish soap. Today I'm working in grams. And the lye is potassium hydroxide. This will make a soap paste that gets diluted 2-to-1 with distilled water, and that will be dish soap. So let's turn on the scale and get out my ingredients. It's going to be a small batch, 100 grams of each ingredient, and there's only 2 ingredients. That will make it easier. But what would really make it easier is if the oils are actually ready to go. And just for the record, I definitely appreciate the term sealed for your protection, because look at my coconut oil. That's apparently how it was on the shelf. I didn't notice it when I bought it. But anyway, it had a hermetic seal, so that worked out well. Also, there's a little 15mm measure of Blue Tide mica. Mica tends to be too heavy for liquid soaps, and you know, sinks right to the bottom. But you give it a shake and you know, the magic happens. It floats around looking pearlescent, and I like the way it looks. So even though it's probably going to sink, I'm going to put it in there anyway to color my batch. Yeah. Let's switch this over to grams. And now we're going to do 100 grams of coconut oil and 100 grams of canola oil. My original recipe said soybean oil. I don't have any soybean oil here. I use canola oil quite often, so I have a whole bunch of it. Oops, wait a minute. Whatever says. I just went to 200 grams of coconut oil. 211 to be exact. So let's adjust my recipe. Oil weight. You know what would be easier? If I just simply did a double batch. Grams to oil weight. There we go. But what I think I'm going to do is pour that off. 0.02. Okie dokie. So back where I started from. So basically that gave me 112 grams of coconut oil. Let's find another top for this. I'm going to need this too. Until I find another top, I'll just put this one back. And be very aware that that's got an issue. Which means it goes on the low shelf now. Okay, now, this says 1 gram. Let's tap that down to 0. And then come over here and put in another 100 grams, which is that. My last batch of dish soap was, well, 3 times the size, which is probably why I didn't notice. Hey, you pour that really quickly. Okay. Like I said, it has some blue tide mica at the bottom here. I'm trying to get it to mix in. Yeah. That's pretty. Okay, now. $100 grams, grand total 200. The 49.667 grams of KLH. Round that off, which should be 50 grams, and the water will be 92. So 92.238 grams. Might as well just say 92. I can also round that up to 3 if I want to. Okay, now. And you notice I got on a mask and a shield because KLH puts out more fumes than sodium hydroxide. Okay, care. Yeah, actually I'll turn it off and then turn it back on. Grams. 92.2. That's weird to see a fraction in a gram, or a decimal rather. Oh, that's 95. A little extra water is not going to hurt, and a liquid soap. It doesn't only this much. Now, what would be an issue is to have too much lye. It's better to have less than more. This is what we call call a right now batch. This batch will be ready today. Usually when I make soap paste, I make enough to, you know, when you dilute it, you just go ahead and dilute it down and use it for months. Like the last batch I made in the middle of April, and we're at the beginning of August. Yeah. This little bit of water and this little bit of lye is all we're making today, right? So I'm mixing it in this container. I'll tell you why in a second. Unlike sodium hydroxide, potassium hydroxide tends to bubble up, so you have to give it enough room in the container to do the bubbling. Yeah. And then you get your long spoon, so that way you can not get any of it on you. I need long sleeves. Hold on. Feel that. Well, we're going to press on and be careful. Sounds like scorching or sizzling. That's the KOH. It does that. Also takes a little bit longer to dissolve. And if this is sodium hydroxide, it will already be dissolved. Or it will be clear. Or it's just like clear. I think I'm going to do this a little too smidgen extra. Like I said, better have more water than less. That's the whole batch. That's not a lot. But it makes making it really fun when it's a small prize, I tell you what. Which is why I usually make a larger size. Usually I don't like to make soap that's under 2 pounds. Just because when it's time to, you know, get everything out of your batch or your bowl, and put it through a stick blender. Stick blenders tend to splash and splatter small amounts. Like I said, this mica is probably going to be at the bottom of the finished batch. But hey, I like the way it looks. concern more for KOH than I do for sodium hydroxide because it always has a little debris of production in there. Let's move this to a safe area. That way curious people don't walk in and go, "Ooh, what's this?" Like I said, this is a time frame where people that usually live here, that are usually very curious, are disappearing. Another thing, KOH, potassium hydroxide, takes a long time to trace, which is when a small batch of whatever you need comes in handy. Because this is just this shape. Just put it in here. And maybe enough to, fill this place. Yeah. But the last time I made this, I literally filled up this size container. And we used it for, that was one of my multi-purpose batches. I used it for dish soap, I used it for body soap, I used it for shampoo. Because of the ingredient supported using it for multi-purposes. This batch I'm using dish soap. So it has coconut, which is a highly effective cleanser, and it has canola oil, which will give you a little softness, but still allow it to clean lasagna and grease and what have you. This part might bore you to tears. It's at 18 minutes and 15 seconds on the timer. So, unless something spectacular happens, like I said, unless something spectacular happens, I'll just trim the video at the 18 minutes and 15 second mark. This has 2 speeds. Hold on. Make sure I end that. That's good. Let's go secret. That's how I burnt out that other blender. Clear space at work when there's potassium hydroxide. So if you notice, I was working right here. I moved it clean over there. That way if there's a splash or something, I'm out of the splash. comes to liquid soap, being out of the splash zone is a good thing. Give me a second. The fumes have gone away, so I can just use the You'll notice it sounds like it's running my blender. That's because it is. Liquid soap requires agitation and heat. In other words, stick blender, and that's also why you cook the whole batch sometimes on a crock pot or on top of the stove. This batch is down to 97 degrees. So it can go on top of the stove. Otherwise, I have to trust the microwave, and with a substance that's prone to volcano out, we ain't trusting it in the microwave. Sorry. It's not gonna happen. I don't need to see that. Yeah. That's going to stay liquid until something happens. Like some heat is added. And now I remember why I always make this in a really large batch. Hold on. Let's find someplace different to be. Sure you can see this. There we go. That wasn't as smooth as I hoped it would be. Okay. Now all I need is my whisk. Or another spoon. So we'll just take the lemon out the sink there. Now I really don't have to worry about a volcano because it's down in here. And you get all this room, so that way besides the misbehave, it can bubble up twice and still not get to the top. That's flashing. See how much leeway I have here. Not enough. I didn't think that was long enough to reach, but anyway. There's a time when you think about it and try it. Hot now. In fact, it's reaching boiling, 160. Okay, steam is rising. It's reached a boil. So I'm going to bring it back over here. Then I'm going to put you back where you started so you can see. And then I'm going to pour the contents, which have already started separating. My water does that, by the way, especially water from potassium. It will separate out, and then you have to beat it back into submission. And since it's easier to work in smaller batches, I'm just going to pour this right back in there. And then if I need to put it back in this, I will. In the meantime, let me get my small spatula. But when you're working with small batches, you want everything small, including your spatula. You don't want to use a big spatula, which can cause splash. Especially if your arms are exposed. Yep. Now, we put this back over here where I'm safe. This has to go through all the stages. I was trying to remember how come the last batch went so quickly and this one is taking a long time, and then I just remembered that was a mixed batch. That had both sodium hydroxide lye and potassium hydroxide lye. This is only potassium hydroxide. The purpose of the addition of sodium hydroxide lye was to cause the potassium to go quicker and heat up faster, which is why it worked out better in one day. I got a slight trace going on. this segment, Watch Paint Dry TV. Yep, there's a trace. There's the paint. Separation definitely went away. Now we got basically the applesauce stage. Applesauce. Next it will be mashed potatoes. And as always, there's me cleaning up a mess. I did not realize that dripped. Give me a second. There's also a reason why you never, ever, ever take your gear, your gloves, and all that off while you're making soap. Especially liquid soap. I don't have to worry about containment or anything, you know, bubbling over in the sink. I just don't like a mess. You don't want a hot mess in the sink, because literally 172 degrees. That's a hot mess. And as you can hear, the stick blender is struggling. It's thickening up through all stages. So it will go through applesauce, mashed potatoes, taffy, solid, as you can tell. Look at there. See that? Okie dokie. That went solid quickly. That has nothing to do with the fact that it's a small batch. That happens in a large batch too. When it's ready, it's ready. I'm definitely going to need the smaller spatula, because even though it went solid, it still needs to be stirred a little. Because even with all these stages, the one stage it hasn't hit is Vaseline stage. When it becomes see-through, clearish looking, looks like Vaseline, then it's ready. Frankly, I swear, whoever decides to classify liquid soap making or crock pot soap making, they had to be hungry. Because with the exception of the Vaseline stage, you know, and the Vaseline is an important stage too, but with that exception, all of the stages in hot process soap and cold process, hot process liquid soap, all are food names. When you think about it, you have the applesauce stage, you have the mashed potato stage, you have the taffy stage. Someone was hungry. this can safely go in the bigger container. Ooh, that's burning my hand. That's also why I use a bigger